everybody doing? So just going to kind of go over a little bit about physical and emotional balance. Now, as far as, and that all kind of compiles into wellness, which is something that Lena's been incorporating quite a bit this semester, and the different components of wellness. I'm not going to go into too much detail as far as the emotional balance is concerned, just from a standpoint, some of that is also a psychological issue or a psychological aspect of it, but I'm going to go into some detail of emotional balance and how it does directly relate with your physical well-being and physical balance. And we'll go over some actual aspects of balance activities and ways to kind of help strengthen your balance and strengthen your overall individual. All right, so the different components of wellness include the social, the physical, spiritual, environmental, intellectual, emotional, and occupational. And all of those kind of have to work together to create an overall wellness and well-being of the individual. So as far as the emotional balance is concerned, what would you think would be the first thing that you would think come to mind? Anybody? What about your emotions?
Happiness.
Okay, happiness, absolutely. It's part of an emotion. Another thing that's really big is, being in the here and now. So when you're thinking about stuff, you're not in the here and now. So if you're thinking of what's going on down the road, as far as where you have going on next week, what you have going on 2 weeks from now, what happened last week, that's not being in the here and now. So if you're in the here and now, that's going to kind of help keep you kind of a little more well-rounded and being able to kind of think about what you have to do at this moment. So and that kind of also implies too in working with your whole physical well-being, which includes along the lines of your body, nutrition, which I see a lot of people trying to eat healthy with the fruits, vegetables, the different shakes, beverages, stuff like that. So that all goes into your body and nutrition. The other component would be your healthy habits. What do you do as far as stress reduction? What do you do as far as your psychological, emotional, mental well-being? What do you do for your physical well-being? That's all components of the physical balance. And then, the ability to take charge of your own health. So if you've got an issue going on, how do you correct that for yourself? Not necessarily what goes on for somebody else, but what works for you at this moment. So that's kind of one of the things that, we really kind of emphasize with a lot of people is right here, right now. What works for you at this moment to get you to what you need to be. All right, so in many cases, that comes down to finding healthy habits that are beneficial for you. Finding a way to balance everything out that works for you. What's going to work for Pat is not going to work for Lena, is not going to work for Mary. So and same thing all the way around. Same thing for Cindy. What works for Cindy doesn't work for everybody else. So it's just what's going to work for the individual. And that's where we kind of try to come in and say, okay, let's get to know the person. Let's figure out how can we get you to be more balanced in what you do on a regular basis. All right, now the importance of your physical balance, as far as kind of going into a little different direction here as far as your physical balance is concerned, meaning what you do on a regular basis. How do you function? Do you fall a lot? Do you lose your balance in everyday activities? What's going on with that? What's causing that? And in some cases, not being in the here and now. When you're thinking, okay, I've got all this stuff going on over here, but you're trying to walk and trying to do 3 different things, you're going to stumble. All right, same thing in life. You're going to stumble. Bless you. So keep that in mind where, okay, how do we improve that physical well-being, physical balance of the individual? All right, so some things to keep in mind is strengthen yourself up. We always practice, different types of strength training routines. Could be body weight exercises. Something as simple as just, sit down, stand up from a chair. Something along those lines. Stability ball wall squats within your ability and your range of motion. Not with what another person can do. So someone who has orthopedic issues, let's figure out what's going to work for that person. Someone has low back issues, what's going to work for that individual? All right, so that's what we're always trying to figure out, work with is, okay, what do we have? How can we improve that? And a lot of it comes down to developing that core strength that's between the shoulders and the hips. That's kind of the knees. That's the core area of the body. Everything you do comes from that region of the body. You reach out, you got to, make sure that you're stable. You go to reach for something, you got to be stable. You go to step up onto an object, say you're trying to put the topper on the tree. You got to climb up the ladder. You got to keep yourself upright for that. So those are all basic stuff. All right, you're reaching up to clean up top cabinets, up on your tiptoes. How do you maintain your balance for that? So those are all some components there to work on. So one of the things that we're going to kind of talk about is how do we improve that? Basic stuff to start with. Now, one of the main things that we always say is make sure you do not have an underlying health condition. If you have inner ear issue, that's going to throw your balance off. If you're sick, that's going to throw your balance off. Fatigued, that's going to throw your balance off. All right, so, and if you have any other health conditions that's going to affect this, get that checked out right away before you start trying to do some of this stuff, because then you're going to get frustrated. All right, anybody who's ever had an ear infection, inner ear issue, you are all over the place. All right, it's almost like the vertigo aspect where you feel like you're here, but then you're just like all over. That's going to throw you off. You're not going to be able to do some of the balance activities. All right, so now to improve some of that, as far as improving your balance is concerned, one of the basic things, sit, stand. Not a fan of the roll-away chairs for this, but to give you the general idea, so when you're doing this, make sure the chair does not roll, all right? So if it's locked, make sure it's locked. Otherwise, make sure it's back against the wall. So what you're gonna do is making, like I said, up against the wall. That way it's not gonna roll away from you. So when you do your sit-stand activity, all cleared around you, you don't have anything in your way. All you're gonna do, just go through, make yourself, you're sitting down first. Get your feet in position, so that way about shoulder width apart, right in front of you. The heel should not be back behind you. Get yourself so that way when you stand up, you're standing up. You're not using the chair to help yourself stand up. You're using your own body to get yourself to stand up. And what I would like to see you do, keep your hands together in front of you, sit down, stand up. Just doing that, try and do that about 10 times. So if you want to do that, do a couple times right now. I'll have you bring your chairs back against the wall. I'm going to get you guys to move somehow. So just make sure the chair is back against the wall, so that way it's against a sturdy object. And then get yourself to stand up and sit down. Go barefoot. Take your shoes off, make it challenging so that way you're flat foot, especially when you're wearing heels all day long. All right, now when that gets easy, a way to challenge that, take a weighted object, take a medicine ball, take something like a gallon of water, hold that in front of you here. Again, sitting down, standing up, sitting down, standing up. So as you're doing your sit-stand, the shoulders should stay in line with your hips and knees. You don't want to be seeing where the shoulders are coming too far forward. So one of the common mistakes we see people do, they come forward like this, and I saw several of you doing this. You're coming forward here to try to come up this way, all right? So you're shifting your weight too far forward. Now, as you're doing that, you want to be able to come forward just a little bit, but not come past your knees. And then get yourself upright. Keep the weight back on those heels. Makes it easy when you've got the heels on. Yeah. Now, like I said, to make that challenging, do that barefoot. Take your shoes off. So that we actually have a sensory input. And you get immediate feedback with barefoot. One of the few times that I'll say, okay, take your shoes off at work, right? Yeah, so you have to sit back a little bit further, the toes come up. And the other thing to kind of keep in mind as you're doing that, try not to get a bounce going. So try not to have your feet bounce to get yourself to stand up. There you go. So it's
forward because you're.
Yep, sit slightly forward, but not too far forward.
No, just sit forward.
Yep,
In the chair.
absolutely, absolutely. So the next step from there would be once you're doing that, and like I said, progressing from there, take the chair away, going into doing a body weight squat where you're coming down, coming back up. Again, staying within what your range of motion is. I'm not expecting you to do a full athletic squat. I'm not expecting you to do a partial squat if you have bad knees. Just do what you're able to do within your abilities. And if this is too difficult for you, then let's take it a step further back and let's just kind of figure out, okay, let's do standing and balance on one leg. All right, so you're just standing up, just to balance on one leg. If you need to, be by the table or by a wall to hold on to something. And then progress from there, going barefoot as well. So those are some progressions there as far as the balancing, just single leg balance. And then the other aspect there, single leg balance with the leg swing. So as you're doing a leg swing, keeping your upper body upright, so you're going front and foot back, side to side. So you're getting the hip going, but keeping your balance in position without wobbling too much. There you go, Donna. See, she's got it. Of course, you can always do it better with shoes on because you have that solid support. When you do it barefoot, you actually have to have your feet to sense, and you're using those senses that you normally don't use because they're always protected in your shoes. I'm a huge advocate for as much as you can barefoot. As long as it's safe, do what you can barefoot. Yes?
I found that my balance varies every day.
It does. It does. And again, it kind of goes with fatigue, what you've got going on. The other thing that some people, if they have sensitivities to certain foods, affects their balance. Stress, anxiety. If your weather conditions too, if you're susceptible, sensitive to weather changes, when it gets really warm, really cold, barometric pressure, when it's starting to rain, that can throw some people off as well. And if you have vertigo issues, that's really going to throw you off. So with the vertigo and you're doing stuff like this, you really have to keep yourself in control. And that's where learning techniques to kind of deal with some of that. And that's where speaking with your physician or the physical therapist that specializes in some of those, and then bring it to us so that way we can kind of work along as a team. All right, so as far as that, any questions on the sit-stand component? The other thing that you can do as well is kind of like a wall squat. So I'm going to move over this way, so clear wall over here. So you can kind of see, as you're doing a wall squat, get yourself so that way you're backed up against the wall initially. Get your feet so that way you're almost not quite a 45-degree angle from the wall. You're going to keep your back flat against the wall, and you're going to come down like you're sitting, almost like doing a wall sit, then coming right back up. So that we have the wall to support you. Does that make sense? And that way you can kind of get that tactile sense there, feeling. The shoulders should be against the wall, the hips against the wall. The knees should not go in front of the toes. So as you're coming down, coming right back up and keeping everything in alignment, that way, especially if you have poor core strength, that's going to help develop that coordination to get into doing a partial squat. I'm a huge proponent for doing those partial squats from the standpoint, sit down, stand up. That's a squat movement. Going up and down the stairs requires that movement. Walking, carrying a load, all requires a simple movement like that. So get those muscles going, get the muscles coordinated, get the neurological component going along with the psychological movements. So getting the brain activity moving, the nerves going, and yourself in the right thought process to move like that. The other thing that it's also going to kind of help with as well is keeping yourself from falling, especially in adverse weather conditions. Winter months kind of brings ice. We're always seeing people slipping and sliding. I'm not going to say it's going to stop you from falling, but at least you're able to catch yourself a little bit better. So that way you're not going to hurt in the long run. Does that make sense there? So all those movements, beneficial for everyday activities. All right, so any questions on as far as the sit stand progression there?
The wall exercise, that's great for thigh strength too.
It is, absolutely. Another way that you can really strengthen that part up too is getting like a medicine ball, a small weighted medicine ball, place it between the knees, and you squeeze the knees as you come down into that squat. So you're getting that internal, external adduction, abduction of the hip and thigh in there along with the whole aspect of strengthening up the outer, the outer thigh and the hamstring and the glutes. So that way you're getting a whole hip complex in one movement. So especially when people just want to do something quick on the go, okay, let's get this done. Let's focus on this part, then add the ball component to it, so that way you're doing kind of like a clamshell movement with your hips and thighs. Any questions in that part? So that's a great progression from the sit stand to doing that to doing your own squat movement. All right? So from there, a weight shift. So then you're just standing and then stand on one leg as you shift to your right. So you stand on your right side, you shift to your right. Go over to your left, stand on your left, shift to your left. Maintain that balance. Coming back, over. So if you guys stand up and try that movement real quick. If you need to, push the chair back, stand in front of the table, so that way you've got the table for balance if necessary. So if you're all going to be doing your right leg, everybody stand on the right leg, shift to the right. All right, try and hold that for a few seconds. All right, when you do the same thing on the left, shift to your left. All right, so when you think about this, when you're doing stuff, when you're walking and you're going over objects, avoiding objects, that's where some of that comes in. Plus, you're not always in one path. All right, so it's forcing you to kind of think, get that vestibular system thinking here, okay, I'm not going to be completely off balance. I'm not going to fall. This is okay. And then coming across this way. And again, same thing, do the same thing barefoot. You're going to notice it. If it's too difficult for you to get your shoes on and off, don't worry about it. So then when you're doing it barefoot, you're forcing your feet to do, and the ankles to get involved in the movement that they need to be involved in. All right? So from there, and this is a great way to get the core strengthened up as well. Because when you think about when you're doing this, you're keeping yourself from toppling over here when you're doing your weight shift. Does that make sense there? So that way you're not doing this type of a movement here where you're coming all the way across. Now, to get more in depth with that from there, kind of do that with a rotation, if you're able to. So that way you're standing up and do a slight rotation coming from the hips. Just a little bit. There you go. So that way it's another way of progressing from doing that single leg shift or weight shift to shifting over. All right, because not all the time are we here and then we go to here. Sometimes you still have to do this transfer of weight from over here to over here. Does that make sense? Trying to get everybody up and moving a little bit here. Get that blood flow going. All right, so now from there, let's talk about core exercises. How many are familiar with doing planks? All right, so if you guys are fairly familiar with doing a plank, I did give Lena a PowerPoint. And in the PowerPoint, it has the diagram of someone actually doing the plank. So since I'm not comfortable with doing it on the floors here. So what you want to make sure that you're doing, the elbows should be right in line with the shoulders. They should not be in front or below the shoulders. Does that make sense? So as you're doing that, so if you're coming up to an object, the way what you can do, kind of do a modification of it on a tabletop, and then get yourself down onto the ground. All right, so same concept, get those elbows underneath the shoulders. So you're not gonna be here or here. You wanna be right there. And dig those toes in. Keeping a flat back, don't allow the back to sway or the butt to come up. So what you should see is a nice line between the shoulders and the heels. Does that make sense there for the plank? So when you're doing that, and if that's difficult, do it from your elbows and knees. You don't have to go to your toes right away. Okay, so then from there, when you're doing that, try and hold it for like 10 seconds. Work up to 15, work up to 20 seconds. It's an isometric hold that's gonna be beneficial for the full core. You get the shoulders, get the back, get the hips, get the abdominal muscles. That makes up the bulk of the core. All right, so you do something like that and it's gonna help promote better posture. Because then with some of the other exercises, it's gonna, again, get the hips involved. Because that's one thing that I see a lot of women we always lack is getting the lower body strengthened up properly, so that way you have a disconnect between upper and lower body. And that's where we see some of the low back issues. And when you have low back issues, that's gonna affect your balance. Okay?
Is it better to do a plank, a forearm plank, or a full plank?
I would prefer to see people doing a full plank, but progression. Let's focus on a forearm. If you are unable to because you have elbow issues, that's where a full plank is going to be more beneficial in that respect. Or have padding underneath the elbow, because there's some women who've had what we classify as like a Tommy John surgery of the elbow. So they're relocating the nerve within the elbow, especially if you're constantly hitting that nerve all the time, it causes a sensitive spot. So they're not able to put pressure right here. So if you have padding underneath, that will help. But ideally, kind of get yourself into a push-up position and hold it in a plank. And then if you want to make that difficult when you're doing that, holding it there, then doing a single leg lift as well. All right, so going from there. Does that make sense? So then, or reaching the arm up and out if you have the upper body strength to handle that. So that's for the plank. The bridge, so again, now you roll over onto the back, place the heels so that way they're closer towards your rear end, and you're gonna raise your hips up off the ground. Does that make sense? So as you're doing that, the hips come up so that way you're targeting the low back, the glutes, and the hamstrings in that movement. And that's where a lot of us tend to lack strength, is the posterior side. We are always working the anterior side, the front of our body, because it's what you see. We're not always working the back side of our body. And that's just as important, if not more so, for balance and stability purposes in everyday activity. Because then that helps with the function of the knee, the hips, and the ankles, and to keep yourself going. All right, and again, I do have images up on there for that. All right, any questions on any of those so far? Any questions on anything I've gone over? Okay. All right, I have one more exercise, it's called the pelvic tilt. So you keep yourself kind of in the same position as the bridge, but instead what you're doing, instead of bringing your hips up off the ground, you try and get your lower back flat onto the ground. So you can do something against the wall as well for the pelvic tilt. So what you're gonna do, get yourself so that you're kind of in a partial squat position and try and suck the belly button towards the spine. So that way you're bringing that spine towards the wall. And hold, it's isometric hold, and then relax. And then isometric hold, and then relax. So that's kind of that pelvic tilt. So it's gonna kind of create a little bit of a stretch of the lower lumbar, but you're getting some of the deeper muscles within the abdominal area and the pelvic area for strengthening. And that's also important for the balance component as well. Okay? Anything else?
How many of those
It's always start off with like no more than about 5 or 6 to start with of something new. Work your way up to 10 and work your way up to just performing 1 set initially. Then gradually add on another set when you're doing these. So instead of trying to go all out doing 3 sets of like the pelvic tilt or the bridge, just do what you can initially, because you're going to feel it a little bit later. You may not feel it initially, but it's something that you will feel several hours later. And same thing with the planks, doing some of that stuff, and just start out with like 5-10 seconds and then gradually work up to hold it for 30 seconds. I'm not going to expect you to do a 30-second hold immediately. So let's just try to build that up. And same thing for your balance activities. If you're only able to balance for 5 seconds, that's 5 seconds. Build up from 5 seconds. All right? And try and do it barefoot. Add towels if necessary for when you're doing it at home. Fold a couple of towels up, place it down on the ground, stand on the towels, because then that's going to kind of change that surface a little bit. So that way it's just not on a solid surface. Do that barefoot. And then you're getting a little bit with that ankle mobility going in. Get a little bit of that knee and the hip is going into it. Okay?
Would you do all these every day or?
Not every day. No more than about 2 to 3 times a week to start with. So make sure you have a couple of days in between to rest. And then add in there walking is also great, beneficial. Biking is fine. So anything along those lines is going to kind of work on that coordination and the balance. And that stays within, and again, always stay within your abilities and your range of motion. So if you're not able to do a full deep wall squat, I don't expect that. I would only do a quarter. It's still better than nothing. If you're not able to do 10 reps of the sit stand, work on building that up to 10 reps.
Does a wall squat increase is it harder to do or is it easier to do?
It's easier to do than a normal squat, but it's a little bit harder than a sit stand. So, because now you're focusing on kind of that balance and keeping yourself in line without rolling back and forth. Because you've got the ball is kind of right in the middle of your back here, and you're holding that in place as you're coming down to that squat and coming back up. So it's just kind of keeping everything in line there and working on kind of that balance and coordination as well. So you're getting a little bit more of the motor control going on within the core, shoulders, hips, and getting a little bit more of the strengthening within the thighs and helping the knees. Anything else? Any other question? Yes?
Could you talk a little bit about avoiding hyperextending, especially the knees?
Absolutely.
That affects your posture.
Absolutely. That's a very good point there. You see a lot of women, what she was bringing up was a lot of people you see when they stand, they hyperextend the knees. So they stand, those knees come back too far. All right, what that's doing, it puts direct shear force right on the femur and the tibia. All right, and then puts a little bit of strain within the patella. All right, so what you want to see, and it strains some of the tendons within the back of the knee. So you want to see kind of, and then it affects the posture, because then what that's going to do, throws the pelvis to come forward too much, and then you're compensating by bringing those shoulders back too much, so you're getting too great of a lordotic curve. All right, so slightly keep those knees soft. As we like to kind of say in our world, is soft knees. So have a slight bend in those knees, and then that way kind of keep yourself so that way the shoulders and hips should stay in alignment, and they should all be within alignment over the ankles pretty much. All right, so the knees should not be back behind the heels, should not be in front of the toes. So it should be just kind of between the ankles and the forefoot is for the posture, and then that's going to help with the hips and then the shoulders. And the other thing too is flexibility. You know, sometimes strength, flexibility issues. So if you are weak if you're really tight in the anterior region, the hip flexors, but really weak in the posterior, it is going to naturally pull your hips forward. Whereas if you strengthen up the posterior and stretch out the anterior, it's going to kind of help to bring that into realignment. So there's several components there. And part of that too is working on strengthening of that posterior So between the hips all the way down towards the knees and ankles, to kind of keep yourself from doing that locked knee, hyperextended knee. Does that make sense? Okay.
So would you say that strength training, especially as you get older, really helps with your balance as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's numerous studies out there that show that. And the other thing too is we see it especially in Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, because then their balance is horrible. You add that strength training component to it, it helps them to have a more natural gait pattern, as well as just maintaining that mobility. And that's the biggest thing too, is as we get older, osteoporosis, arthritis, mobility issues are huge. Best way to keep yourself moving is just to keep moving from the very beginning. Keep the joints fluid and just keep yourself doing what you're able to do. If it's some of the stuff is too difficult, let's scale it back. What works for someone else. So the other thing too is incorporating body weight training, use of bands like I've already mentioned in the past, going into doing light weights, and then gradually making a gradual progression from there. So it's just keeping the body moving to kind of help with some of that. Anything else?
What does membership at the fitness center include?
Well, since you're an employee, that's a great question. If you're an employee, $30 a semester, $70 a year. So, and then the thing is too, is that we have several employees that have only paid one time, because you get 43 hours in a semester, you get the next semester for free. The other thing too is some employees do is doing a 1 credit hour class called HFE 120, because then you can do that for credit that counts towards your professional development clock hours too, but only up to a certain point. So that's kind of talking with HR about that one.
And do you analyze, I know that you require physicians.
Yeah, women over the age of 55, men over the age of 45 require a physician referral form. If you're on any heart-related medication, if you're diabetic, seizure-related medication, blood pressure, we do require a physician referral form because all of those can be altered through exercise.
And who's there real early in the morning at 6 a.m.? Are you there or?
Joel or I. So we rotate our mornings. So one of us is always there at 6 a.m. One of us is always there up until 5 o'clock, Monday through Friday. There's always at least, sometimes between 9 and 2, we're both in. But, yes.
What's your background?
Okay, I have a Bachelor of Science in Exercise Physiology, Master of Science in Kinesiology. I work with range of populations that range from people that have stroke, traumatic brain injury, athletes, to the presumably healthy populations as well. And working with some of our employees, getting themselves back on track as far as their health is concerned. One of them that's kind of been promoting this quite a bit, coming back from some serious shoulder issues to being able to do his normal activities again. So it's kind of a broad range of people that we work with. And we also work with some of our active seniors. We're starting to gain some people from the Woodstock Hospital that's closing down as far as the phase 3 cardiac rehab. So kind of a good broad mix of people. So it's not just one population that we work with at a time. We'll go from one to the next. All right, anything else?
And how do you get people started? How do you get them?
Well, we do, when you sign up for the membership, we'll go through and we do an evaluation of you. So what we do with that includes getting your resting blood pressure and heart rate, height, weight. If you want to do skin fold measurement, determine body fat percentage, upper body strength, which is an isometric curl, back flexibility, aerobic fitness, and we go through and compile all the results for that for you. And it kind of goes to a printout and shows you what you could probably work on. And we kind of figure out a program that works for you and with what you need to do. I'm not going to say, okay, let's go and do this over here when you don't want to do that. Instead, let's say, okay, let's stay over in this area, and then maybe we can gradually get you over here when you're comfortable. So it's all within what you are willing to do. So we try to encourage you to keep going, but each person's going to be different. Like I said, we do have several employees that do come in during their lunch hour. Some people come in before work, some people come in after work. It just depends on what you're comfortable with doing. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one.
Yes.
If you're like standing in the kitchen over your counter for a long time preparing food, you get a lot of pain like across there. Is that a weak core that causes that?
It could be a weak core. Part of it too is also depending on the type of flooring you have. Standing in one position too long, if you're not shifting that weight enough. Because I know for myself, I have a difficult time just staying in one spot, just staying still. I can't do it. You're going to see me just constantly kind of move a bit. That I do that in the kitchen as well. I'm moving back and forth. I'm not staying in the one spot the whole time. So, but that's part of it. That's a lot right there is a weak core, poor posture. So if you're just kind of standing, you're hunched over, leaned over like this, that's going to affect, it puts direct strain on lower back. So another thing that's beneficial there is like the anti-fatigue mats, especially put it in front of the sink, in front of the stove. I know for myself, I have it at my island as well for food prep, stuff like that. Anything else? All right, if there's you don't have any other questions, I would say we're free to go. You know where to find me. I'm in room A202, or send me an email if you have any questions. I know Pat's done that a few times.
Thank you.
You're welcome.